Recently, the Sudanese rebels of the Rapid Support Forces (RSF) have taken al-Fasher, a key city in the Darfur region of Sudan. During the capture of the city, rebels of the RSF killed more than 2,000 civilians, according to militias affiliated with the government army. After a siege lasting more than 500 days, the government army withdrew from the city. This means that virtually the entire Darfur region is now in the hands of the RSF rebels. This is not the first time Darfur was ravaged by war. Back in 2004, the UN labeled the situation in Darfur the worst humanitarian crisis in the world. So, why is Darfur such a doomed place? Let's discuss. The situation in al-Fasher is catastrophic. It already was, but now it has become much worse, says Sudan expert Suleiman Baldo. In 2 days, more than 25,000 people have tried to flee the city. Days of walking in the scorching sun without food or drink, while they are already weakened and have been undernourished for months. Local and international aid organizations warn of ethnic cleansing and war crimes, something the RSF has been guilty of in the past. Earlier this year, the United States concluded that the RSF had committed genocide and crimes against humanity in Al-Nunayah, in western Darfur. Some 15,000 people, including members of the non-Arab Masalit ethnic group, were killed there. The RSF consists mainly of Arab fighters who target ethnic groups of African descent, although they deny this. Researchers believe they can see piles of human bodies near RSF vehicles on detailed satellite images. This third Sudanese civil war had started in 2023. Fighting broke out between the government army, led by General Burhan, and the paramilitary RSF fighters led by General Hemedti. Initially, the fighting was mainly concentrated in the capital Khartoum, but then spread to other parts of the country, particularly Darfur. The UN calls the situation in Sudan one of the worst humanitarian crises of the world. Tens of thousands of people have been killed and nearly 12 million have fled, including more than 4 million to neighboring countries. A year and a half ago, the RSF began surrounding al-Fasher. At that time, the government army and affiliated militias were still in control, but since then the situation in the city has deteriorated day by day. Civilians were trapped with daily shelling and bombing. Some were able to flee and made their way on foot to neighboring Chad. It seems like a repetition of the conflict in the early 2000s that started while the second Sudanese civil war was still going. The second Sudanese civil war was a conflict that started in the early 1980s and was concluded in 2005 and led to the creation of a new state, the Republic of South Sudan. That is perhaps something for a future episode, because let's stick to Darfur. Darfur is a region inhabited by multiple ethnic groups. Roughly speaking, it can be divided into nomadic Arab tribes on one side and non-Arab tribes living off agriculture on the other. Both groups are Muslim. Until the 20th century, Darfur was a center of the slave trade. At that time, the region was characterized by agricultural activities. Conflicts over water and fertile land, both scarce, have caused tensions between these tribes in recent decades. Periods of drought and desertification since the 1980s have exacerbated this problem. A civil war broke out between the government of Sudan and the non-Muslim South. This war ended with a ceasefire in the early 2000s. Agreements were concluded on raw materials. In 2003, it was agreed how the revenues from oil exploitation would be divided between the South and the central government. The agreement did not satisfy activists in the Darfur region. Two rebel organizations, the Justice and Equality Movement, JEM, and the Sudan Liberation Army, SLA, accused the government of favoring the Arab population at the expense of the African population. This feeling of discrimination had long existed among the population of Darfur and was reinforced by this agreement. In early 2003, the two rebel movements, the Sudan Liberation Army and the Justice and Equality Movement, took up arms against the Sudanese government. They accused Khartoum of discrimination and demanded greater autonomy and a fairer share of national wealth. The government of President Omar al-Bashir responded with overwhelming force. It mobilized the Sudanese army and Arab militias known as the Janjaweed, meaning devils on horseback, giving them weapons, supplies, and air support. The Janjaweed carried out a campaign of mass killings, village burnings, and systematic abuse aimed at the civilian population believed to support the rebels. By 2004, hundreds of villages had been destroyed and hundreds of thousands of people were dead. More than 2 million fled their homes, many seeking refuge in camps across the border in Chad. The scale of the atrocities shocked the world. The United States and several human rights organizations described the campaign as genocide, while the United Nations called it a case of crimes against humanity. In 2007, the International Criminal Court (ICC) began investigating. In 2009 and 2010, the ICC issued arrest warrants for Omar al-Bashir, accusing him of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. It was the first time a sitting head of state was charged by the ICC. Meanwhile, international peace efforts began. The African Union and later a joint UN-AU peacekeeping mission, UNAMID, were deployed to protect civilians and monitor ceasefires. Despite this, the violence continued, often shifting between rebel factions, government forces, and rival militias. Several peace agreements were signed, but mostly failed to take hold. By the early 2010s, the conflict had already lost much of its international visibility as global attention shifted toward South Sudan's independence and other crises in the Middle East and Africa. The large-scale fighting that had devastated Darfur in the early years had largely subsided. The government had regained control of most towns and major roads, and rebel movements were fragmented and weakened. However, the underlying problems, ethnic mistrust, displacement, and poverty remained unresolved. The region was still plagued by sporadic violence, banditry, and clashes over land between Arab and non-Arab communities. Millions of displaced people remained in camps, dependent on humanitarian aid. Many of them were unable or unwilling to return to their destroyed villages, fearing renewed attacks or lack of security. In 2019, after months of nationwide protests, Omar al-Bashir was overthrown by the military, ending his 30-year rule. This opened the door for renewed peace efforts. The new transitional government, which included both civilian and military leaders, signed the Juba Peace Agreement in 2020, with several rebel groups, including factions from Darfur. The agreement promised integration of rebel fighters, regional autonomy, and compensation for victims. By this point, the Darfur conflict had largely quieted. But the scars of the war were still deep. Many communities remained divided. Justice for war crimes was incomplete, and the region's economy and infrastructure were in ruins. UNAMID began withdrawing in 2020, marking an official end to the international peacekeeping mission, though many observers warned that the peace was fragile. And peace was fragile indeed. Since April 2023, Sudan has been torn apart by a new civil war between the Sudanese Army (SAF) and the Rapid Support Forces (RSF). The RSF, which grew out of old Janjaweed militias, now controls most of Darfur. The Sudanese army holds only small parts, mainly around the city of Al-Fasher, which has been under siege for months. In many places, Arab militias allied with the RSF have attacked non-Arab communities, repeating the same kind of ethnic violence that once shocked the world. Civilians are trapped between two sides. Millions have fled their homes, and many are now facing famine and disease in overcrowded camps. Towns and villages have been destroyed again. The humanitarian aid is almost impossible to deliver. By 2025, Darfur has become one of the worst humanitarian crises in the world. Again, the war shows how all divisions, weak government, and the struggle for power continued to devastate Sudan, especially the people of Darfur, who are suffering through history's repetition. The current war in Darfur is not simply a repeat of the past, but it is shaped by the same forces: ethnic polarization, political exclusion, and the ruthless use of militia power by elites in Khartoum. What makes this phase even more dangerous is that there is no central authority left to negotiate peace. The fall of Omar al-Bashir in 2019 raised hopes for democratic reform, but those hopes were crushed when the military factions that had overthrown him turned on each other. The civilians of Darfur are now paying the price for that collapse.